What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Hub City Hoops Talk podcast. He's Jacob Harris, and I'm Austin Massey. Today, we're going to be diving into Texas Tech's upcoming matchup against Cincinnati. They're actually going to be playing this one in Lubbock tomorrow. We're recording this on a Friday evening. But we're going to go ahead and break down Cincinnati's strengths and weaknesses. We're going to discuss the keys to the game for Texas Tech. And at the end, of course, we're going to give our score predictions. But as always, guys, hit that subscribe button and like button if you're enjoying the content. And with that said, let's just go ahead and jump right in, Jacob. Excited for this matchup. I believe this is the first time Texas Tech and Cincinnati have played in quite a while.
I believe it was 1961 the last time they did.
Wow, of course you got that stat ready to go. Look at you, man. But go ahead and just give me your initial overall thoughts. I don't know how much of Cincinnati you've watched. I know you know Wes Miller and some of the transfers he's gotten this offseason.
Yeah.
But give me your initial overall thoughts.
So I feel like their front court is very, very, very good. They've got a couple of guys that can really rebound the basketball. One big in particular that can really score down low. Another one that kind of gets, some what we call trash buckets, some offensive rebounds and stuff like that. Their guards aren't that impressive. I've watched a couple of their games. I watched their upset win over TCU at home. I feel like they made a ton of shots that they don't normally do. Ironically, it almost kind of looked like TCU playing Texas Tech earlier in the week. Like they were just making off balance, shots from like the short corner and fadeaway shots from deep and just really weird shots that don't normally went in for them. The one thing they are going to do is rebound the basketball very, very well, and I think Coach McCaslin said that a lot this week. So that's definitely going to be something to watch out for.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, we talk about this all the time, but it feels like every team in the Big 12 is pretty good at rebounding, maybe other than Tech and a few other teams. But you hit the nail on the head. Cincinnati is the unique thing about Cincinnati is they're not just like particularly good on one side of the rebounding, like they're actually good on the offensive glass and the defensive glass. And that's kind of anchored by their two big men. They have two guys who are 6'11" and up. I actually went in and watched some of Cincinnati's film earlier. Aziz, however you say his last name, he's got sticky hands, man. Like he just snags the ball out of the air. He's got very strong hands as a rebounder. And then they got Victor Lakin, who's also a really good rebounder himself. Again, both of those guys over 6'11". But again, you really iterated on it, but their guard play is pretty underwhelming in my opinion. I look for Texas Tech to kind of exploit their long matchup by just being a little bit quicker on the ball and off the ball and just attacking the rim tomorrow. That's my biggest thing. I went back and watched West Virginia. I went back and watched Cincinnati's loss to Oklahoma, and they lost in Cincinnati. But what Oklahoma did so well was they just destroyed them around the rim. I mean, they did make some timely shots down the stretch against Cincinnati, but really, blowing by a lot of these lengthier kind of guys that they have on the court. And another thing that stood out about Cincinnati, I don't know if you've noticed this, Jacob, but they don't really have elite athleticism like a TCU does.
No, they don't. Obviously they have a lot of big guys. They have a lot of length on their team, but that length isn't like Kansas State's length that is just super athletic.
Yeah.
It can guard multiple spots. I mean, I believe the way you say his last name, Aziz Bendago.
Okay.
So he was probably one of the more sought after transfers in the transfer portal. I got to cover him a good chunk of his recruitment. He was, schools like Duke and I think Iowa State. Just a ton of really high major programs were after him. Cincinnati kind of, swooped him up mostly because of his waiver issue. He wasn't really able to get going until that court ruling about a month and a half ago. But yeah, their guard play is definitely suspect. I feel like, I feel like guys like Joe Toussaint who like to put their head down, gets the rim, are going to be able to make some plays tomorrow.
I agree. I would actually look for Joe Tucson to have a pretty big game tomorrow, guys. Don't be surprised if that happens. I think that his matchup could be, kind of a nightmare for a team who's not very athletic and they're not very quick just in general. Again, a lot of length, not a lot of athleticism, but they do play very strong, sound defense. They're top, 20-ish defense in the analytics. They also don't send teams to the free throw line a whole bunch defensively. So that's something to keep an eye on for Tech. Don't expect maybe a ton of fouls, which hopefully they're going back to Lubbock. The whistle hasn't been in their favor the last few games. So we'll see what happens with that. But let's just go ahead and dive into their strengths and weaknesses, Jacob. And we're talking about Cincinnati here. So we've already touched on some of them. I'll go over a few of their, or actually, I'm sorry. Let me let you go over their strengths. I'll go over the weaknesses for Cincinnati.
So, like I said, they're long but not super athletic. They do rebound the ball very well. They have 4 guys that average over 5 rebounds a game, which is a pretty hefty amount, including a couple guards. They got a really good defense. I think top 20 in the country. They have a really like we kind of talked about down low. They have a dynamic duo and Bendago and Lakin. They can also put I think his last name is Lacucius, whatever. Sorry if you're watching. They can put in there. He can get some rebounds. They have a guard Schilling coming off the bench that's averaging about 5.5 rebounds a game. Really, really impressed with their rebounding ability. Then they have a couple of guys who can get hot and make shots for him. John Newman being one of them, but the rumor around the water cooler is he might not even play. So they're kind of banged up right now, so that is definitely something to watch for as well.
Yeah, so I believe it was Newman who's a little bit banged up. He got banged up in the West Virginia game. And then also CJ Frederick, which, by the way, I had no idea he was on Cincinnati's roster. It feels like, I
Yeah,
believe, I mean, he was a pretty high profile transfer at one point, and I believe he was maybe out all last year with an injury or something like
he
that. But
was.
so anyways, he by far, guys, CJ Frederick is their best shooter, best 3-point shooter. And John Newman's actually probably their second best 3-point shooter in terms of volume and efficiency. So potentially Cincinnati kind of, dealing with some major injuries. Both of those guys are actually starters whenever they're healthy. So 2 things to watch there. And in terms of the weaknesses, they're pretty limited offensively. The analytics don't love their offense. They're ranked 93 in adjusted offense right now. Um, I think that they only put up they didn't even put up 70 against West Virginia.
No.
Again, the biggest problem for Cincinnati is a couple things actually, but number one, their guard play is just not consistent. They're relying on Day Thomas a ton, who's not really a good shooter. He does have some good burst getting to the rim. That's something I've noticed. He can definitely blow by you and get to the rim, finish. And then they also rely on a freshman. His name is Jizzle James. So that's definitely top 5 name in all of college basketball. Actually, Day Thomas and Jizzle James are probably 2 top 5 names.
Oh,
So
shizzle, my jizzle.
that's right. They got the All-American name guard, backcourt. So they do got that going for them. But again, dealing with injuries, they're vulnerable. One thing I noticed in watching their tape, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, is they're vulnerable defensively against guards that attack downhill. So don't be surprised. And Pop's been getting better attacking downhill. He doesn't really. He kind of just. He's not the most freakish athlete or anything like that, but he's been really good and very smart in the paint. And obviously Tucson, he's kind of just due for a breakout game. It feels like this is going to be it. I don't think that the guards on Cincinnati necessarily have the best defensive metrics. I think a lot of their defensive metrics are kind of boosted by their ability their bigs to block shots around the rim, and then also their rebounding ability. But again, look for Texas Tech to exploit their length and their kind of lack of athleticism. And honestly, Tech has done pretty well with teams that aren't super hyper athletic. BYU is a team that I don't think is very athletic, but I think they're a far better team than Cincinnati. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be important that Texas Tech gets off to a fast start, in my opinion, in this one. But Jacob, let's go over your keys to the game for Texas Tech to pull off the win.
Well, key number one is to limit their offensive rebounding. I think their defensive rebounding is really good, and it's kind of staying on its own no matter what. We Texas Tech isn't a great offensive rebounding team, nor does it really need to be,
Yeah.
based on their shooting numbers and their offensive efficiency. But on the defensive end for Texas Tech, really keeping them to one possession that killed you against TCU, as we saw on our film breakdown, angered me and everybody else probably watching. That'd be key number one. Key number two is getting to the rim from your guards. The way Cincinnati likes to play their defense, kind of like you said, their defensive metrics are all kind of anchored by their two bigs down low. They like to funnel everything to them and let Bendago and Lakin block shots, play defense on guards. Actually, I think that's an absolute advantage for Texas Tech, because one thing that especially like guys like Pop Isaacs have done really, really well this year, and we've seen it a lot in the past couple of games, is they're drawing bigs to him, and then makes really, really good pass to Warren Washington, who's usually wide open, at the basket. So that's key number two. And key number three is not trying to force shots. That's killed you the last few games. I think late against TCU, it really came back to bite you. There were about 3 instances where you were maybe in a 2-possession game, a 4-point game. You came down, you just kind of jacked up a 3, and it just kind of ruined things for you. They started doing that again against BYU in the first half. We kind of talked about that when we did the recap of that one. But not really just kind of forcing up shots whenever Cincinnati maybe gets hot is probably key number 3 for me, and just kind of running your offense. Because when you run your offense, you're very, very, very efficient.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the most efficient offenses in all of college basketball right now, guys. Texas Tech actually ranks like number 11 right now in adjusted offense. They also just score very well in general in about all of their offensive metrics. So Texas Tech's a legitimate offense. A couple of things for me. 2 things when watching their film. Actually, Aziz Badengo, hopefully said his name right. He's very long, but he's very slender and he's not very strong. I would not be surprised if Warren Washington had his way with him tomorrow, if they can get those two isolated on each other. I also think Darian Williams could potentially back down Adingo and kind of just use his core strength to kind of push him off of him a little bit. He's obviously long and wiry and can get blocks from some crazy angles. But I watched the tape yesterday, and Oklahoma bullied him on with his back to the basket, with their back to the basket. So don't be surprised if you see Warren Washington backing down Adingo if they can get that matchup. I also think in general, you're going to see Texas Tech's guards have a big day tomorrow. Again, I'm not really too concerned about any of the guards defensively for Cincinnati. They are super ultra long, and they're going to work on the glass. You and I, again, you said it. We sat down and we showed the tape. It's ugly. If Texas Tech's going to come out and they're just going to stand around and watch them kind of dominate on the glass, I mean, it's not going to be good. You're looking at extra possessions. I actually think one of the things that Cincinnati does so well, I was looking at their possessions today. They're averaging 7 to 10 extra possessions a game than their opponent right now, even in their losses, which is bizarre. And how do you get extra possessions? You rebound, and you get steals. So keep an eye on that, guys. I mean, it's again, it sounds silly, but obviously McCaslin talked about it in his press conference today, but that doesn't mean that the team's going to come out and do it, right? So we'll see what happens. That's a huge key to the game. I also wrote, let your shooters shoot. I think that I'd like to see Chance McMillan continue to get a good amount of looks. I think that, he is just on an absolute tear lately. Pop Isaacs is on a tear lately from the 3. Kerwin Walton's obviously damn near a 50% 3-point shooter. And Joe Toussaint, he hasn't actually really been shooting it well lately, but he can hit them every now and then. I would prefer if Joe is driving downhill against Cincinnati. But I also would like to see Pop and Toussaint eating in the pick and roll. I think you kind of alluded to it, Jacob, but with Tech, Texas Tech's not an athletic team, but if you're comparing them to Cincinnati, I think they're more athletic than Cincinnati. And using that pick and roll to get their bigs moving and kind of, create some space, and having Warren Washington cutting to the basket with a Dingo or Lakin trying to guard that. I don't love that matchup for Cincinnati. So get that pick and roll offense going. It's been so good at times. That was another thing I wrote. Just keep the offensive movement, clean and keep it moving. Essentially, keep these long guys on their toes. Get them out in space. Make them uncomfortable. And Texas Tech's going to have a great shot to kind of expose them a little bit offensively. But again, very tall front court. But Lakin's pretty, he's a pretty solid build. But Aziz is just, he is pretty skinny for how tall he is. And I think that even Warren Washington with his stature, he's not the biggest guy either, but he's definitely bigger than Aziz. So look for Texas Tech to kind of exploit that matchup as well. And then, we'll see what happens with the injuries. I think if CJ Frederick plays tomorrow, that changes the dynamic of the game, because he all of a sudden, if he makes a couple threes down the stretch, could change the outcome of the game. Texas Tech's 3-point defense has obviously been abysmal at times. So look out for the injuries. I think if CJ Frederick and Newton don't play, that's not going to be good for them at all. Sorry, Newman, not Newton. So keep an eye on that as well. But Jacob, let's go into our score predictions. I'll let you go first today.
All right. So I'm predicting a 8-point Texas Tech victory. So Cincinnati has kept it close in every single loss. I think everything has been within 5. I think Texas Tech is able to exploit their deficiencies and get a little bit more than 5. I don't think it's going to be a double-digit game. I think it could be, but I think Cincinnati is one of those teams kind of like Texas Tech that likes to play it pretty close and come back from things. So I'm predicting Texas Tech 77, Cincinnati 69.
I like it. I'm going to go Texas Tech 78, Cincinnati 66. I think that the Red Raiders are going to get back on track today. I think that, I think they're going to get back on track tomorrow in their game. I believe that it's at 5 p.m. Central. But I think they're going to get back on track tomorrow. I think you're going to see the guys making a more concerted effort on the glass. They're going to have to. Again, I also just don't love the matchup for Cincinnati. Neither of their bigs are really going to back you down. So I don't think Texas Tech has to really worry defensively. A lot of people think, oh, well, their front court's huge. They're both 6'11" and up. Aziz is not going to back you down. I can promise you that. He's very limited offensively. Actually, he's very good. Very limited with his kind of what his skill set in the post, but he is very good at cleaning up the glass. Obviously dunking around the rim. Lakin is more skilled offensively. He may back you down every now and then, and I believe he actually has a pretty decent shot as well. I don't think he's like a high level shooter, but for a big man, he can shoot it. So again, I'm not super worried about them backing Texas Tech down in the paint. I'm more so worried about them cleaning up the glass and getting a lot of tip ins and things like that. But I think Texas Tech's just going to be too much in the long run with their offense. I'm not like a super firm believer in Cincinnati's defense. I think their analytics may be a little bit, kind of inflated, I guess to say. But we'll see what happens. It's going to be a fascinating matchup. I'm excited for this one, honestly, Jacob. But guys, like I said earlier in the video, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Means a lot to us. We're getting close to 200 subs, Jacob. We'll have to we'll do a little giveaway or something at maybe 500 subscribers, guys. So we'll keep you posted on that. But as always, thanks again, Jacob, and we'll see you guys soon.